So I saw the tributes to Pope Francis start to roll in, and then immediately online, I saw all the references to the movie Conclave. That's the movie that showed us all the drama around selecting a new pope. There's Conclave, there's the two popes, there's a young pope, so much more. Today on the show, how the Pope is portrayed in pop culture. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and I know my own name, and this is Commotion. Look, I think the best place for us to start is right here.
The Pope is dead. The throne is vacant.
The conclave begins now. We're about to choose the most famous man in the world.
And 1.25 billion souls watching.
Let's say this is a pretty fair vision of hell.
Well, don't be blasphemous, Ray. Hell arrives tomorrow when we bring in the cardinals.
That is a bit of the trailer from Conclave, which is streaming right now on Prime Video. It stars Ralph Fiennes and Isabella Rossellini. It got 8 nominations at this year's Oscars, including Best Picture, by the way, and also took home Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar. In the coming days, you're going to see a real-life conclave take place. Dozens of cardinals are going to come together inside the Sistine Chapel of the Vatican, and then they're going to elect a new pope to lead the Catholic Church. Conclave is actually based on a book. It's based on a book by Robert Harris, who said that he had Pope Francis specifically in mind while he was writing that book. And it is not even the only film in recent years that is inspired by Pope Francis. We have a lot to talk about. The group chat is here. Radheyan Simonpillai is with me here in studio. Ashley Ray's here. Teri Hart is here. Hello to all of you. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. Listen, Rad, I'm going to start with you. For anyone who's not seen Conclave, can you just start off maybe by describing what happens and why so many people were excited about that movie when it first came out?
I mean, I think a big thrill when it comes to that movie is you're seeing all the behind-the-scenes pomp and rituals and the stuff that the general public is not usually invited to, and you're actually seeing that it's just populated by a bunch of gossipy cardinals. Right? It's like for all of this ceremony, for all of this hierarchy, they're just messy, they're petty. Mm-hmm. I mean, the movie, it begins in the immediate aftermath of this Francis-coded pope passing away, and they have to do the conclave, they have to elect a new pope, and the movie kind of plays out like a game of Clue, where the Ralph Fiennes character, who's overseeing the conclave, has to shuffle through every character and dig up the skeletons in their closet and figure out, what kind of mess is this person going to be as the next pope. That's where a lot of the entertainment is. And then, obviously the timing of that movie, not the timing in the sense that it showed up right around the time that our current pope was facing health issues, but the timing of it coming out in election season. A lot of people saw that the divisive politics in the movie, the divisive politics that are represented in the movie, where we're seeing a lot of the reactionary conversations we're seeing out in the world, that's playing out during this movie coming out during the U.S. election period, right? So that was a big appeal. But also, like you're saying, all the memes right now are coming out of Conclave. I don't know if you all saw, The Guardian put out a chart of the 10 possible Pope candidates, and I'm like, which one is Cardinelli? It's hitting in the moment right now.
I will say that, Ashley, for me, watching Conclave, one of the fascinating things that you watch is a push and pull that's quite explicit about the politics inside the church. I mean, as Rad mentioned, the Pope who dies in Conclave, at the start of Conclave, is a Pope Francis-coded Pope, who's kind of been taking the church in a certain direction. And then what you're seeing unfold is kind of a push and pull over the explicit politics of the remaining cardinals and where they might take the church. Tell me about your relationship to Conclave. What do you love about this movie?
I mean, I love that it is basically the Real Housewives meets Young Pope. I love the drama of it. Personally, I studied Latin when I was in high school and college. When you study Latin, one of the few things that matters is the Vatican. It's the only place where they still use it. So I've always been interested in the processes and traditions that they use. And really the only time people are ever interested in Latin is when there is a conclave and people are like, what are they saying? What is this whole thing? So, seeing Conclave, I was like, oh my gosh, people are going to think this is cool, like mainstream, which I think is exactly what happened. Everyone clearly thinks, papal news is so interesting now. But the movie, to me, brought to life all of these just really cool ancient sort of traditions, but updated them in a way where anyone is going to care about it because the drama is so juicy and good.
It's that contrast, Terry, between all of the traditions that Ashley's talking about, but also all the real life, Ralph Fiennes very stressed out, got to go to somebody, go like, you can't be Pope. Here's a thing that you did in your past. I'm so sorry. I think that's going to put the church in a bad light. And then that person has to go, oh, God, you're right. I don't think I can be Pope. And that's the summary of Conclave. No, how is Conclave sitting with you in this moment right now, Teri?
I mean, Pope Francis was 88 years old when he died. So, you can't say that the book or the movie were exactly prescient. I mean, this is not an unexpected event to happen for somebody of that age. But for sure, both the book and the movie recognize that this was an event that was going to happen in the relative near future. And this text and this movie kind of framed a lot of things that I think people didn't know. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that I have imagined right now the red ribbon with the wax seal on the Pope's apartment. I mean, so how is it sitting with me
Iconic
right
Conclave
now?
image for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is frontal lobe. The movie is frontal lobe and very fresh. All of that iconography that, I was really introduced to in Conclave.
Okay, let's sit a little deeper in the politics of this movie for a second, Rad, because I mentioned, yes, the Pope who dies is kind of loosely inspired by Pope Francis, but also he leaves behind some suggestions to say, like, I would like the church to go in this direction.
Right.
And internal to the movie's mechanics are this sort of push and pull between Tedesco, who wants to take the church, allegedly 1,000 years back in terms of the ways that it functions in society, versus the more progressive factions of the church. And there's kind of like this push and pull between, who wins and whose motivations are true and whose motivations are kind of like a little bit, they're attempting to hide them. Tell me about how the Pope is portrayed in Conclave.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, the Pope is dead before the movie begins, or right at the beginning. So we don't actually meet the Pope. We only hear how people speak about him. And, there's a lot of love for him. There's a lot of affection for him. There's a lot of there's just a lot of respect for everything that he achieved, that he's said to achieve. And I mean, we gather that. I mean, one thing we find out throughout the mystery of the plot is that he was weeding out a lot of the corruption within the church. And then the other thing is that he was very progressive, especially on like LGBTQ rights and gender stuff, right? And so specifically, like, I mean, and that's part of, like, in terms of the plot, in terms of the worry that a Tedesco might take the church 1,000 years back. They're worried that the church would go back to the dark days of more homophobia, right? And then, I mean, can I give away the spoiler here? Like, is that like, can we like?
It's been
can we
4 months.
It's been 4 months.
Yeah.
Can we talk about how, like, the entire plot of this actually ends up hinging on the fact that this Pope in secret ordained an intersex cardinal, and then so that's the big revelation. And so I mean, like, that's not something, when we talk about this Pope being Francis coded, and a lot of what he does is a lot of the stuff we hear about Pope Francis. Of course, we never heard of Pope Francis doing anything like that, but I think it's interesting. I mean, if he did do something like that, if he did it in secret, we wouldn't know. Yeah. Right. But I think there's an interesting benefit of the doubt that this narrative gives to a Pope Francis-like figure. And it just speaks to it speaks to the way Hollywood itself and the people who are creating these stories around this Pope Francis era of the Pope, of the Vatican and stuff, are willing to give a figure like that the benefit of the doubt and assume he would be that radical.
Well, I was going to say, like, I don't think this happens with any Pope, Teri. I don't think this happens with any Pope that you can sort of project this image of what might this Pope do that we don't know about, and then you end up finding out that it is a more progressive thing that you would expect a Pope to do. But Pope Francis, I do think, was a figure that functioned in a different way, in a pop culture way. And I want to come back to that because there's that puffer jacket image that I want to get to in just a minute. We're not there yet. I want to just sit in just a moment longer in Conclave because, as you say, it's frontal lobe. Before the movie Conclave, had you ever thought about what happens in a conclave? I mean, you watched, Pope Benedict get elected. You watched Pope Francis get elected. You've seen the smoke rise through the chimney. But having said that, have you ever thought about, like, what is the mechanic inside a conclave until the movie Conclave?
100% no.
Okay. All right. Got it.
I was not raised Catholic.
Sure.
So my knowledge, my education around Catholicism, a lot of the religion and a lot of the rituals, frankly, come to me from movies and television. Yeah. So beyond that smoke, the black smoke that turns to the white smoke, which I think even Conclave cleared up for me. Like, I think that I knew so very little, and now I feel like an expert because of Conclave. I mean, I'm really not.
You are.
But I mean, and I think that was one of the successes of that movie is it did pull back that curtain to a lot of things that have been going on and really impacted people's existence for a very long time, and then didn't have an impact on other people. And I think it brought those two ideas together a little bit.
I like to imagine everybody heading into the Conclave has seen the movie Conclave, Ashley. Like, I think like that's something that's going to be a little bit different about the next Conclave. But that's, I think, a separate conversation. I think after seeing this movie and the ways that people reacted to it, Ashley, what conversations are you seeing people have about the death of Pope Francis and about this upcoming real-life conclave that you think, this is different because of the movie Conclave?
Yeah, I think Teri is right. Most people didn't know much about this process, and Conclave doesn't just tell you about it, but makes it seem very fun and interesting. I think what we're seeing are a lot of memes based on the movie. So like Rad said, there are people making lists of like potential new popes. People are already turning them into playing cards. They're already like photoshopping them so that, you know, one is vaping like Tedesco. And people are like, wait, which one is secretly trans? Like, how do I make sure I vote for the right one? And it's like, we don't vote actually, so maybe you should rewatch it. But I just think before this movie, most likely the interest in a conclave would have just been, oh, it's this weird old thing that Catholics do. How does it work? And now we're actually seeing people who are not Catholic have interest in who the next pope might actually be, beyond just, oh, I guess that's a thing that matters to some people. But I think people are really like, oh, I understand now that whoever leads the church really will have a say in how it's run in the future, how people are impacted politically. And it really is a big deal. If
you're just joining the excitement and conversations around what happens in a real life conclave, I can tell that you have not read the Da Vinci Code. I can tell that about you. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Radheyan Simonpillai is here, Ashley Ray's here, Teri Hart is here, and we're talking about how Pope Francis and the papacy is portrayed in film and TV and what it says about this moment right now. Teri, we're talking about Conclave, which, we're streaming on Prime right now, but I want to talk about another movie from 2019. It's called The Two Popes, which is a dramedy, and that kind of imagines the drama behind the Vatican walls between Pope Benedict and a future Pope Francis. And they're discussing their past and trying to find some kind of common ground. Have a listen to this.
We believed it was better if 9 children suffered than if 9 million lost their faith because of a scandal.
No, of course not. That is grotesque.
A bishop said that to me.
How did you answer him?
I told him to remove the priest from his ministry and initiate a canonical trial straight away. I didn't believe a few magic words from the priest would make everything all right again.
Magic words, is that how you describe the sacrament?
Confession cleans the sinner's soul. It does not help the victim.
It's quite an intense scene, I think in a pretty intense movie. You can watch The Two Popes on Netflix now. Teri, as you kind of watch this sort of, imagined conversation between Pope Benedict, who's, as far as I know, the only pope to resign the papacy, and a future Pope Francis, what did you get from watching The Two Popes that you didn't get from watching Conclave, you think?
So I think that Conclave is about, we've used the term pulling back the curtain on the kind of the ritual and the protocol around the conclave, whereas The Two Popes, I think, was trying to humanize the person who is the Pope. And at the core, they're both dealing with that push and pull that we've mentioned, and you've specifically said, Elmine, of the push and pull between the more conservative and the more progressive sides of the church.
Yeah.
But they play out as different genres even. I mean, the conclave plays like, Rod said, a clue game. I would say like a thriller, whereas Two Popes is, a two-hander talker with two of our best actors walking in a garden. I mean, they really are different genres of movies. But I think that it's also that they were made for very different reasons. And you have to recognize that this religion, Catholicism, has like 1.4 billion followers worldwide. And it's been steeped in so much secrecy and so much controversy. I mean, we just heard some of that controversy in the clip that you played in The Two Popes. And it's also so much money. The Catholic Church is a religion, but it's also a business. And the Pope is the CEO of that that business. And that business has billions of dollars. It's very hard to find out how much the Catholic Church is actually worth. I spent some time trying to figure it out, and it's anywhere between $48 billion and $265 billion. So, you know, it is a religion, it is a business, and this person is not only the leader of the religion, but runs all of that business. So it's a very, very important job. And I think both movies, Conclave and The Two Popes, come at it in very different ways and using different genres of movies.
God, I think at least just the Sistine Chapel alone might be worth a couple billion. You know, but it's just me speculating. Rad, Pope Francis was elected in 2013. How do you think the portrayal of the Pope and the papacy has evolved just in that period of time?
Well, I mean, I think Pope Francis made the Vatican seem more accessible. You know, the fact that we could have storytelling where we're watching Pope Benedict and Pope Francis eat a pizza together, you know.
And
like,
we know what that means, right?
In the young Pope. Yeah, the fact that that Conclave is bringing us in. I mean, like, you know, when I think of like before Pope Francis and what I knew of the Vatican, what I knew of the Pope before that, I mean, it was Godfather Part 3. You know, like it was the movie where, like, you know, it was all these depictions of the church and the Pope and the Vatican as this thing, this untouchable entity that's lording over you from up on high. In The Godfather Part 3, we're literally finding out that the church is just as big a criminal organization as the mafia. Like, that was my impression of the church.
Of
yeah. Da Vinci Code, they're like the crypt. So there was this like out of reach aspect of it. And then when Pope Francis comes in, all of a sudden you get all this storytelling where we're invited into kind of the private chambers. We're invited into the conversations. We're invited into these people, these men who are just ultimately fallible and have their own doubts and who are, you know, debating and negotiating their own faith and the flaws within
pushing and pulling back and forth.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's because of the appeal of Pope Francis, because of his progressiveness, because all of a sudden the wider public were more fascinated with him. They all of a sudden wanted to tell these kinds of stories about the Vatican as opposed to it being this nefarious entity from up on high.
I want to add some thoughts to that, but actually, let me give you a chance to just sort of respond to what Rad is saying there. What do you make of what he's saying?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think a big part of Conclave is the Vatican realizing they can't separate themselves from the world anymore, that everywhere the world is quite literally exploding into this sort of secret closed off society they've created, and that can't work anymore. So I think we are seeing, you know, that the Pope, that the Vatican has become more open. And I think a lot of past media didn't really play into that. I think a lot of it was about humanizing this person at the center of this giant secretive society. If you look at a show like, say, Young Pope, which was super great. It's about the first
HBO's
American
a Young Pope. That was
HBO.
Jude Law.
Yeah.
Yes.
With Jude Law, super sexy Pope.
Yeah.
But he plays the first American Pope. And the twist is sort of that he is this hard line Catholic, even though he's young and American, and people are a little shocked by that. But at the end of it, it isn't so much about him trying to change anything or have bigger politics. It really is about him being this fallible guy who has depression, and everything he's doing is like acting out against his parents. So I feel like past media, even when it came to the new Pope, which is the Young Pope's sort of sequel, it doesn't really look at the larger impact that the Vatican has on people's personal politics. And I love Conclave because it really does hit at that message and says, you know, what this person decides, what the CEO decides, it's not just going to be business. This is going to be how women access healthcare in different countries. It's literally, people literally will create laws based on what this man says. And Conclave, I think, does a great job of bringing that reality to life.
I think that's what I see is at least an attempt, and maybe that attempt is facilitated by someone like Pope Francis, but an attempt to reckon with the human elements that shape the church as opposed to the church as some sort of like monolithic institution, which is to say that when you can humanize an institution, you can ask better questions of it than if you can, if you just kind of say like, oh, this institution is, you know, it sits 30,000 feet up high and I don't know how to get my way in there. And we're talking about these particular works of art today because they do center on the role of the Pope, but also there are millions of people who are grieving this loss, but also there are people who have deeply conflicted feelings about the institution as an institution, right? There's the numerous cases of sexual abuse over the years. There's a treatment of Indigenous people right here in Canada. And like there are works of art and there are films that sort of try to deal with this. There's a documentary in Viaggio, and then there's also the movie Spotlight. And like Spotlight is entirely about the secrecy of the Catholic Church and the ways that the Catholic Church has power, specifically in Boston. Rad, what do you think film's role is in addressing these wrongs and sort of putting them up front and center?
I mean, I think Spotlight is a good example of a movie that was really challenging the church, and I don't see a lot of that in a lot of the films in the Francis era. You know, like I think film's role is to challenge the
Spotlight
church on
is
its
in the
history.
Francis era.
Well, it is, but it was early, right? Yeah. So it's like, but I mean, like that's the thing. It's like I think the later films, beginning with like the two popes and stuff, don't challenge it enough. And I mean, In Viaggio is a great example because that's a documentary that actually follows Pope Francis as he's on his sort of apology tour, as he's flying around to every different country, speaking out against war, speaking out, apologizing for the abuse of children in the church, apologizing for the residential schools and the horrific violence that came out of that. That whole movie is sitting there. What I thought was, it's sitting there watching him and observing him in this tour. And what was interesting about that movie is that it had a lot of silence and it had a lot of negative space where then you could actually kind of weigh and negotiate with yourself of how impactful these apologies are and how much is it really doing in terms of restitution to these victims. And I think there's a lot of room for you to question it. There's a lot of room for you like, okay, great, he apologized to the Indigenous people of Canada, which I know was very important and really meaningful for a lot of people. Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, did he use any of that wealth that Teri was talking about to then help, to give back to those communities? Did he do anything kind of impactful in that way, or like that clip you played from the two popes, that clip where it's like the confession is only healing the soul of the sinner, it's not really doing anything for the victim. So in some ways, his apology tour almost felt like it was rehabilitating the church more than it was restoring any kind of anything for victims. And so I think movies haven't really challenged that, and Viaggio had that in the negative space. I think there's a great movie called Sugarcane, the documentary Sugarcane, actually made by Canadian filmmakers about BC residential school, about the discovery of the unmarked graves in BC residential schools. Yeah. And there's a character in that, there's a gentleman in that movie who was a victim of abuse in a residential school, and he goes to the Vatican during this apology tour, and he comes out like just shaken and unsure. And so like that's the kind of so in documentaries I think there's more challenge, whereas in like I didn't like the two popes because it felt like it was just kind of a pat, okay, we've acknowledged it. A lot of movies lately have, I think, been like they've been taking the apology, they're like, okay, we can now tell nice stories about this pope. Even Martin Scorsese, the guy who made movies about like sinners and doubt and all that stuff, he had a meeting with Pope Francis and he came out, was like, I think I'm going to make a nice movie about Jesus now. Like that's how much
he's in fact doing that. That's his next movie. I would just say two things that are important to note here. In 2022, Pope Francis came to Canada. He apologized to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit residential school survivors. And former Assembly of First Nations Chief Phil Fontaine was on As It Happens yesterday. He's also a residential school survivor and said Pope Francis did the right thing. This is his quote. Pope Francis did the right thing when others would not. He said that his apology set the stage for reconciliation with the church in this country. So I take your point about the idea of did it show up in the way of using the wealth? Maybe not. But I do think it opens a different kind of door. And maybe it's a cultural door. And I think that's kind of the thing that we're talking about today. Teri, I want to give you the last word on this because I want to talk about also some of the ways that Pope Francis showed up in pop culture in some unexpected ways. And I have like about a minute left here. Do you want to tell the puffer jacket story? Because I still can't believe that's a real thing that happened. Not a real thing that happened, but a real thing that, spread around the internet.
I do want to talk about the puffer jacket story, and I feel like it is a perfect place to end because I think everything that Ashley and Rod have been saying about how pop culture has kind of been what has pulled back the curtain on all these rituals, and it has happened as our media has changed. It has happened as social media has come into our lives, and people have been screaming from the rooftops that they want more authenticity from everybody, from every brand, from every influencer, from every pope. And what that means is even the Pope is not immune to being a meme. So it was a couple years ago, he was memed in this very, very stylish puffer jacket, white puffer jacket.
Yeah.
It looked a bit more like Stay Puft Marshmallow Man than a Vatican pointy hat.
It did.
And it went viral. It was a big lie. He didn't really wear the hat.
It was AI generated. Yes.
It was AI generated. It
Yeah.
was AI. He joined X in 2013, or Twitter in 2013, and then he joined Instagram in 2016, and he has 10 million followers on the gram. I just want to point out that the gram actually was created in 2013. So the Pope.
Yeah.
The Pope joined Instagram only 3 years after it was created. I think the Pope was on Instagram before I was, which I believe really does solidify him as the cool Pope.
I got to leave it there. I appreciate your time, all of you, and your thoughts. This has been a wonderful conversation. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back tomorrow. We will see you then.